So I, at the moment, run Raw Optics, which is a blue light blocking glasses company. And basically I design, improve, and sell glasses that block the frequencies of light that disrupt our internal circadian rhythm, which is the 24-hour system that runs our biologic functions. And the most important of them in particular, our sleep-wake cycle. So I got into that as a way to make a living based on the information I had learned about to fuel what is my passion, which is learning about how the body works and doing so from a foundational perspective that could allow me to reverse health issues that I was facing when I was younger, just going into high school. And those things primarily involve the role of light on our biology and the way that, for example, mitochondria, these little cellular engines, power all of our organs and tissues and cells, and how the research is showing for the last few decades now that mitochondrial dysfunction is the root cause of these modern chronic diseases that we're facing today, from cancer, Alzheimer's disease, obesity, diabetes, autism, and so on and so on, and mental illness, for example. So that's pretty much my interest.
Yeah, nice. So you were talking about your issues back in high school, your health issues. So what were they exactly, and how did you get out of it?
So I was always struggling from headaches every day. Just, people know what it's like to have a headache, but it really isn't fun, of course. I was struggling from headaches and gut issues. So anytime I would eat, I would have bloating, gas. It was just miserable, unpleasant being in high school for me, of course. And then I also was struggling from allergies, pollen and dust allergies. So pretty much no matter which season, wherever I went, I was having some congestion, sneezing, and this kind of thing. So it was a very, let's say, not fun way to exist. But I was convinced that these things were genetic at their core. So I actually thought that I couldn't do anything about these because they were normal and you couldn't change your genes. That was the biggest issue for me. So what I started, what I should say that triggered me into actually doing more research was the fact that I started having acne breakouts when I was about 14 years old. And then I got onto diets. And when I tried the paleo diet, this diet that was intended, again, to just try to clear up breakouts I was having on my face, these other issues basically started to almost magically disappear, which is something I was completely shocked by, because I didn't think that was possible, that we could just eliminate these issues that I thought were genetic my whole life. And so I basically started asking, what else don't I know, and how can I actually completely eliminate these issues and other issues that I had, or anything that was suboptimal. And that sort of got me on this track of at least starting with diet, trying to improve my health. And when I hit a wall there, which we can get into, I learned about how we have these cellular engines which are required to process our food. And if they're not functioning optimally, then no diet is able to fix our health.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I actually learned from you, which is that the sun and how much sun you get is arguably much more important than actually the diet that you eat. And I remember you saying one thing where you said, our biology is all about getting energy from the environment to delay the point of death. And yeah, the key is getting the energy from your natural environment. So that's just the sun, oxygen, and also good nutrition. So why would you say, what would you explain to someone that hasn't heard about this yet? Why is sun more important than actually good nutrition?
That's a great question. The sun is good nutrition. So basically all complex living organisms that we derive, we evolved from a common ancestor, and that common ancestor was a photosynthetic bacteria in the oceans. You could say the mother of all complex organisms. And just that alone indicates that a lot of our most foundational physiologic functionings are derived from something that was governed by light and by the sun. So basically, the best analogy to think about it is to think about a car. A car has an engine, and then it has gas that goes into the engine to basically fuel the engine. Now, if the engine itself isn't functioning well, then no matter how good the gas that's going into the engine, it won't matter for the functioning of the car. Because again, for example, let's say you have a broken car engine. If you're putting in premium gas, but the engine's broken, will it function? Obviously it won't function. You need to fix the engine, take it to a mechanic and get it tuned up. And so in our cells, just like a car, we have engines and then we consume fuel in the form of food. And so if the fuel that we're consuming is super optimal, but our engines are broken, then we're not going to be able to achieve optimal health no matter what. And it turns out that the engines in our cells aren't tuned up by the food that we're consuming. It's just the fuel. They're actually tuned up by, more than anything, our sleep and our hormone function, which is entirely governed by light.
So what are some of the practical things that people need to look out for in order to actually optimize that engine?
Well, the first is melatonin secretion. So basically, you want to have optimal melatonin production and secretion, which means we want to be getting up in the morning when the sun rises and be observing and allowing the light to be incident, hitting our eye from the moment when it rises, depending on where we are on Earth, until UVA light becomes present, which could be on the equatorial regions, 15, 20 minutes after sunrise. In winter zones, it might be 2-3 hours after the sun rises, but we want to be present outdoors for that change of the light and for the rest of the day as well, but primarily, especially in the morning, because that change in light from the moment the sun rises to the moment UVA light becomes present signals for the creation of really important hormones and for our circadian rhythm. Among those hormones and neurotransmitters are melatonin. So that's really important. And then in the evening, we want to have an absence of blue light frequencies, because blue light, which is a component of the sun, but also a component of man-made light bulbs, basically tells the brain it's time to wake up. And so if you have blue light at night, you're not going to be secreting melatonin. It prevents the secretion of melatonin, essentially.
Yeah, so that's usually, I think the biggest killer of that is probably the phone, right? Because especially in the evenings, people want to wind down. They come home, they will look at their phones. So it's phones, it's lights that you see here. So it's really important to get that darkness, late in the evening, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some of the things that you do to actually optimize that? I know you're also traveling, often depending on where the most sun is. I would assume, because you're currently in Croatia. So what are some of the things that you do? Because I know, especially when I'm traveling, it gets really tricky. So I'm in Cyprus right now, really sunny here. I've blocked out all the windows with aluminum foil, like a serial killer, because at night there's just so much light coming in. So what are some of the things that you do to actually optimize your sleep, the darkness, and things of that nature?
Yeah, so I watch the sunset in the evening in general, or at least I'm always outdoors, or I have my windows open. Like I have a big window right in front of me, fully open to the elements, and pine forest around, making lots of oxygen, which is amazing. So watching the light decline is very good in the evening, and that basically, contrary to the morning, basically tells the brain it's evening time. The light's going down. So I do that, and then I will wear blue light blocking glasses the moment the sun goes down, because blue light blocking glasses, again, they block the frequencies of blue that are emitted by screen devices and light bulbs, car headlights, and so on. And so that way the brain can know that it's night and begin to secrete melatonin, because it was thought for a long time, for 150 years after rods and cone photoreceptor cells were discovered, those that are linked to color vision, that those were the only two classes of photoreceptors that we have in our eyes. But in the early 1900s, there were certain findings. For example, there were mice that were accidentally bred to be completely blind, meaning their rods and their cones didn't work, yet they still showed a entrainment to differing light levels, their pupils would still adjust, which indicates that there was another type of photoreceptor that could allow that change to occur. They didn't know what it was. And then in the 80s, they found similar findings, again, in controlled studies where they would remove or blind the rods and the cones in mice and test certain physiological functions. And one thing that they noticed was their circadian rhythms were still intact, even when they blinded them from their color vision. So in the late 80s, early 90s, and late 90s, and the early 2000s, that whole end of the 20th century, there were a series of discoveries that basically implicated that we have a third type of photoreceptor called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. In other words, the eye isn't just a camera, it's a clock timekeeper. And so basically what was found in these cells that because they knew about these retinal ganglion cells, they're part of the inner layer of the retina that basically transmits nerve signals from these rods and cones into the vision centers. But certain of these cells are what they call intrinsically photosensitive. So without another pigment sending a signal to them, they were light sensitive. They didn't know how, because there was no known pigment that would be sensitive. But they discovered a pigment called melanopsin, first in frogs and then in us as well, in these cells. And basically melanopsin is specifically sensitive to blue light wavelengths around 480 nanometers. So, and that is in these intrinsically photosensitive, these retinal ganglion cells. And basically that means when blue light hits our eyes, whether it's in the morning or the evening, it automatically generates nerve impulses. And rather than them going across the optic nerves, which cross at the chiasm, I should say, and then go back to our visual centers in the back of our brain, they go directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is just sort of in here, just behind our eyes in the front of the brain. And that has been shown to be the master timekeeper for our circadian rhythm. So that drives, among other things, our sleep and wake cycle. It controls the function of peripheral circadian clocks in our organs and everything else. And that alone is set by blue light. So it's such an interesting thing because it's such a simple mechanism. Just light from the environment sets this timekeeper, which literally controls the time systems from the entire rest of our body. However, all of evolution, there was no point at which we could affect that system artificially. Lightning bolts are very brief, exceptionally brief, that you can't even take a photo of them, and they're very dim anyway. The moon is exceptionally dim, that it hardly affects these systems, although on a full moon it can a little bit, but again, it's so dim. Just to give some comparison, the light intensity of a bright sunny summer day is between 50 and 100,000 lux of intensity on the Earth. Full moon is between 0.03 and 1/2 of a lux. So it's orders of magnitude difference in strength. So the point is that this system it's very functional throughout all of evolution until man became able to create artificial lights that could actually stimulate this system and disrupt it. And that's why it's such a simple thing, but getting up in the morning and letting the sunrise hit the eye to set the circadian rhythm, and then wearing blue blocking glasses the moment the sun leaves the horizon, is absolutely the simplest and most critical hack to maintain our hormonal function and our circadian rhythm. So that's basically number one that I do. And then number two, I try to block out artificial light at night from my sleep space, but at the same time, I want to have the light to wake me up in the morning. So the better hack is just to try to be in a spot. I happen to find a really good one at the moment where there isn't a ton of artificial light around at night, street lights, car lights, headlights, and whatnot. And that's very, very good.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm currently doing is part of my morning routine is when I get up, I actually meditate in the sun, because then I get my meditation in and I get sun immediately. In the evenings, same as you, when the sun goes down, actually putting on blue light blocking glasses, which I have to look more into because I don't know how good they actually are. And then we can talk later about yours. And,
which ones do you have?
It's like a German brand that I bought because I was currently in Germany at that time, and it's called, I don't know. It's
Spectra or something. Yeah, I think I might know which one, but anyway, continue.
They weren't the cheapest ones. So I made sure that, it had good Amazon reviews and some people on there sounded smart. So I bought it. I'm kind of like the guy that lets people like you break it down and take on all the information. And then I just trust people that are really into biohacking, that they kind of know what they're talking about, because it's just so much information out there. And yeah, so if I got that correctly, it's not necessarily the sun hitting your skin that much, but mainly the eyes that makes the circadian rhythm optimize its timing.
Primarily, yes, but it's interesting that there was research in the last 5 years that actually showed that our skin and subcutaneous fat, so the fat below the skin, is also it does also contain melanopsin, so it's present in a lot more places than just the eye, which indicates that sort of the entire body and the cells across the body are run by the light hitting our body essentially. And what that reminds me, I should actually take my shirt off and let the light hit my skin because it's been a cloudy day. Yeah, well, you don't have the light anyway, you're indoors now, but I mean, I'm indoors too, but I have the window open. So anyhow, so yeah, that has been my findings at present.
Yeah, and that's kind of also the reason why you should block out the room as much as possible, right? Because your skin
Mm-hmm.
has a receptor, and even if you have these what are they called, sleep masks, the light is still hitting your skin when
Yeah, that would be a good reason to block out the light from a room. But again, it eliminates you from getting the light in the morning to wake you up, which again, it depends on your circadian rhythm, but that can be very, very helpful for a lot of people. Now, I would say, like from my experience, I've been doing an experiment lately where I would go to sleep, for example, shortly after the sun sets. So say 7:45, 8 p.m., 8:30 latest. And when I did this, I would even find that I wake up at 4 in the morning, very rested. And the reason being, I mean, if you count from 8 to 4, that's 8 hours of sleep. So you don't necessarily need to sleep until 5, 6, 7 when the light's coming up. You know what? Did I do my math right there? 8 to 4 is not, that's only 6 hours of sleep. 8 to 6 is 8 hours of sleep. But so for example, I should say like 5. If you go to 5, that is 7 hours, and that's pretty adequate. What I did, for example, one night I was asleep at 7:45 and I woke up at 3 a.m. feeling extremely refreshed. And that's off. That's probably related to my traveling. But the point is that if your circadian rhythm gets very dialed in, you can actually, be waking up before first light, because if the body's repairing very optimally, you don't necessarily need the light to wake you up. Your body will just get its repair in, and then you'll be fresh and awake the next day.
Yeah. So it's probably ideal to then match your sleep timing when you go to sleep and when you get up to actually when the sun is setting and when the sun is getting up, right? That would be the most natural way, so to speak.
Yeah, that is the most natural way. I just redid my math in my head, by the way, and my math was right the first time. 8 to 4 is 8 hours of sleep. So it isn't actually that crazy. Yeah. That is optimal. Again, like if today, myself included, because of the many disruptive factors in the environment, namely artificial light, but also non-native electromagnetic fields, complete, lack of solar exposure growing up, all the toxins that we're exposed to, and so on, bad food, these inherently disrupt our ability to function properly and regenerate and everything. And therefore, like, whereas our ancestors might have gone to sleep at 9 or 10, even, who knows, more likely they would have gone to sleep earlier, because after, like, for example, if someone's gone camping before, that after, the sun goes down, it's dark, you can't see anything. You might have a bonfire 2, maybe 3 hours, but still it's 9, maybe 10 at the latest. And you're just completely out cold. You can't even stay awake. It's so challenging. At least that's been my experience. So it's likely I would presume that's how they operated as well. So if they're going to sleep at 10, and you're optimally functioning, you probably don't need 8 hours of sleep, to be honest. 6 hours, 7 hours I bet would suffice. So you're up before first light. You're rested and you're up. And I have found from my experience that when I wake up in the morning before first light, even when it's still dark out, it is the most peaceful, serene, meditative, spiritual experience ever. And that's why I'm just starting to go to sleep earlier and earlier, because I get nothing from being awake after sunset except circadian disruption, essentially, from the artificial lights. It's been, I mean, of course, if you live in the modern world, which I've been sort of on my own, traveling and doing my own stuff, so I'm experimenting, of course, then you get a lot from being up after sunset, like social connection, family, and whatnot. But again, like, the way we've structured our society and our lifestyles is responsible for the reason we're having so much chronic modern disease. So we can't necessarily have our cake and eat it too. We can't have the best of both worlds, but trying to figure out how to get as close as possible to the best of both worlds is a home run. So I, for example, tell people the best thing to do, and I actually got this from an Ayurvedic doctor who I've been learning from, because I should say ancient Eastern wisdom has been considered woo-woo for a long time. But the stuff I've learned from the Western science about the light diet, it has implied that a lot of what ancient Eastern wisdom has been talking about for thousands of years is actually, a lot of it is directionally accurate, at least, if not very spot on. So taking one of these recommendations that I got was go to sleep no later than 10. And they say it's because the nervous system can't fully regenerate if you're going to sleep after 10, which actually makes sense because you're not going to be able to get much more than full 8 hours before the light starts to wake you up before, let's say, 6 a.m. if you go to sleep past 10. Also, you're staying up very late when the sun's no longer present to power the biology. So this is also very taxing on the body. It might seem like there's no effect to light in our consciousness to someone who's not aware of it, but actually just the act of being awake when the light is out, the light, even though it's cloudy outside right now here in Croatia, the light is still powering a lot of my biologic systems. So the longer that one stays awake after the light goes away, the more basically you're stressing and taxing your body. So this is why. So going to sleep between 9 and 10, or even before 9, for me, again, I'm shooting now for like 8, just as part of an experiment, just after the sun goes down. And it's been unbelievably awesome so far. But that's a really great start. And then, getting up, if you're doing well, you should be just naturally waking up before the light. But if your body's just begging to sleep later, that means there's probably an issue. Doesn't mean you should force your wake up, but I would say definitely shoot to get to bed earlier so that you don't have to use an alarm to get up to get the sunrise. Because if your body does want to sleep later, then you're missing the sunrise. So you're losing out on that front and not getting all the proper hormone secretions. So again, going to sleep earlier is just the home run.
Yeah. Then you also get in the red light from the sunrise and also the sunset later on, which is so powerful. And I guess it's just really hard for people nowadays because there's so many societal norms now. I remember living in Barcelona and I wanted to go out for dinner with my friends, but I knew that I would have to go to bed soon, and I wanted to stop eating by 7 p.m. And the whole city was just up when I was wanting to go to sleep because I wanted to optimize my sleep routine. And I was just like, I wish society could just be like, everything goes like happens 4 hours earlier. Like we get up earlier or 3 hours or whatever, or really optimize.
Yeah, but that's the effect of artificial light. Like everyone is circadian shifted to a later hour. Everyone's staying up later with artificial lights. And so, it's how it is right now. But again, like that's why I like talking about this, because for example, last night someone had a light on outside of where I'm staying. And I was thinking, I want to create a world where it's considered not just disrespectful, but like just very inconsiderate, very, very inconsiderate to have bright lights on at night that are going into other people's windows, because it really is disruptive for our circadian rhythms and our sleep more than people could imagine generally. And that's the kind of world that I want to shift to. And again, that's why I'm interested in doing what I'm doing, because teaching this, like I'm going to do my thing. Sure, I'm going to make exceptions all the time. I mean, I imagine not all the time, but consistently. But over time, I'm going to look to sort of create community and live with people who are more aligned with this stuff. And I think it'll catch on, to be honest.
I hope it will, because I'm fully with you on this, because I'm usually that type of guy who's like putting on the glasses and then asking someone to turn off the lights. Like I was in Bali with some of my friends, and they would have the lights on late at night, and I was like, I'd like dim the lights a bit, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so dark in here," like turn it on fully again. And I was like, it was a bit isolating sometimes, because I was like, I know how important sleep is. Sleep is the superpower of the human body. It can almost heal anything, if not heal anything. It was quite isolating a bit, because more people need to get educated on that stuff. And not just that, but also I remember you talking about actually sunscreen and the use of sunscreen, because I used to tan really well when I was younger, And for some reason, I had lost that ability, so I thought. But when I listened to the podcast that you were on with Luke, the Lifestylist podcast, you were actually talking about increasing your sun exposure, and then with time, you start tanning more, and your skin gets more adapt. And I'm more tan than I've ever been in the last 10 years because I started sitting in the sun more. And it's actually, yeah, exactly what you said. So that's one of the other things that people are so wrong about our health now, where they think they have to put in sunscreen, that sun is actually bad for your health.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not good. There's lots of research showing that, or I should say maybe not lots because there's no interest in funding it, but there is research showing that the chemicals in sunscreen, when they're absorbed into our skin and then struck by light, they become really oxidizing, and they create basically free radicals, which are, damaging molecules when in excess. And so this wearing sunscreen is literally creating a higher risk of the thing that it claims to prevent.
Yeah. And also sunglasses, also a thing that I don't wear, where people are like, oh, why don't you wear sunglasses?
Yeah, much worse than sunscreen.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
It's simply because the sun is not hitting your eyes, right? Which is the best place the sun can hit your
Think
body.
of it this way. Like the eye is just like the mouth is the way that you put food into your body. The eye is the way that you put light into your blood. So if we block the light going into our bloodstream, which catalyzes all sorts of reactions of molecules, it charges up our red blood cells, which bring light to our mitochondria to power mitochondrial function and so on. Our mitochondria can function basically just on light, not entirely, but for a large portion, they can generate a lot of their energy just from infrared light from the sun. There's like a really interesting system where ultraviolet light sort of tunes down the function of cytochrome C oxidase, which sort of reduces mitochondrial energy generation, but then the infrared portion actually increases the production of ATP without having the food electrons coming in from the other part. So this is basically natural calorie restriction, because in the engines, with sunlight alone striking, again, the eyes and the skin without blocking sunscreen, contact lenses, anything like that, clothing, literally it's almost like if you had a car engine where when the light, like a solar car engine, where when sunlight hit the car engine, it reduced the amount of gas that it was pulling in from the gas tank. And then it just started to run purely on solar energy. That's literally what happens when we're in the sun. And this is why, like, again, we can't run entirely. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say can't, because I imagine that there are like Buddhist monks who have done it. They're just not highly reported. And there are some who have been reported to do this, but I can't say that it's credible or for sure. So I won't comment on it fully. But we can definitely operate on a lot less food than we think we need. Like, I need very little food, particularly in the summer, and especially when I'm in like a tropical region. I just can't eat. In fact, because of societal constraints and whatnot that I put on myself, I often will overeat, because I'm like, my body's just like, I don't want food, but my brain and my mouth is like, nom, 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 I love food, I just want to eat more. And then I'll just feel like junk because I've just loaded myself up when my body was so good without. So, I mean, that's just, that's just me doing that with not listening to my body, of course, in those cases. But the point stands, we don't need tons and tons of food when we're in the sun. It's really cool. It's natural calorie restriction, and that prevents us from gaining weight. Essentially, that's one of the ways that prevents us from gaining weight.
Yeah. So what I hear from all of this, and kind of like to break it down to a basic principle, is that you want to look at how we used to live on a day-to-day, how we used to eat, how we used to move, how we used to walk, and really try to apply that to today's life, optimizing, like looking at how we used to sleep and then sleeping that way now, what times we used to sleep and then sleeping that way now. Also, when it comes to diet, actually looking at how our ancestors ate and then eating like that, because that's how our bodies have evolved. So, but there's so many technological changes coming up now in society, which we're pretty much not prepared for. We don't know if in 10 years from now, men stop having the ability to produce children because the Wi-Fi just screwed us up.
I mean, it's already happening. Yeah, it's pretty bad now. And children that are being born today have huge amounts of mental disorders and autism and so on. It's really not a good state of affairs. But again, I'm not focused on trying to help and save everyone because it's not possible. Like there's a lot of people, um, like myself before I started digging into this included, that wouldn't want to have been, assisted. If someone had come to me and said, I know all this stuff, I'd been like, no, I'm busy with my life. Forget about it, but it takes, I think, a lot of struggling oftentimes to go to a place where you're interested in looking beyond the box. And so I'm interested in just going on podcasts like this, talking to people who are interested. They'll pick this up. They might think, oh, this is interesting, and I'll look into it a little bit more. The people who aren't, that's fine. They'll go on with their lives and the world will operate as it does. But this is like my way of sharing information and contributing a bit.
Yeah. For those who are listening. Yeah. And are willing to actually look into this and change their lifestyle, even when everyone points the other direction and walks into the other direction. So what do you think are some of the other things that people need to look out for when it comes to these technological changes? We talked about, for example, the iPhone or whatever phone you're using, the Wi-Fi or whatever, Bluetooth, like that stuff can't be good. For example, I was using, I was buying this new shampoo here because I ran out of shampoo, and I started using it, and it had this really weird feeling on my skin. And I looked at it, it was like this mental, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but this certain like minty type of stuff in it. It was like a mint flavor, and it's like, this can't be good for my skin. I actually thought about it, like, do we actually need shampoo? And no, we actually don't. And I stopped using shampoo, and I think I look great. I think I smell good. And when I started telling my friends about it, they were like, "Oh, makes sense. That's why you smell so bad." But it's like they actually think they need to use shampoo, but that's just one of the things that it's like, why do you use that? It's like that can't be good. So what are some of the other things that pop into your mind that where you're like, okay, this something for those who are listening and are willing to change their lifestyle and want to optimize their health and longevity, like that's what you need to look out for?
Yeah. Well, I usually just go through the light diet step by step. I mean, I tell people get up in the morning and watch the sunrise. And the step that precedes that, of course, is going to sleep early before 9 or 10, ideally, and slowly dialing these things in so that even if one's sleep isn't optimal, they will start waking up earlier before the light comes up. And so, getting the sunrise, spending the day outdoors, not behind windows. So windows are an issue. And then living outdoors during the day, doing whatever work you do, doing it outdoors. If you have an office job, that's really rough. It's going to prevent you from improving your health tremendously. But you can still go out as often as you can in the weekends and whatnot and get the light you can, because it's not all or nothing. There's still a benefit to be had. Fluoridated and chlorinated water, like no one should be, I would say, no one benefits from drinking city tap water because it's full of all kinds of different chemicals. Luke Story had a podcast with a guy about that. It's disgusting, like the stuff that's in city water and municipal water. Just fresh spring water, bottled. If you can get glass bottles, great, and so on and so on. Reusable bottles that are BPA free, the big ones you can fill up oftentimes. Certain places, great too. Return them and get your deposit back. Awesome. Eating seafood also helps us to assimilate more light because of the omega-3 fatty acids. And that's also the food that our ape ancestors consumed when they were isolated towards the coast in East Africa, according to the archaeological evidence that allowed us to evolve the human brain. It wasn't organ meat like a lot of paleo carnivore people say, because otherwise, for example, lions who eat organ meat all the time would have bigger brains, and other animals that eat organ meat would have much bigger brains, but they don't. But we ate seafood, which contains, again, DHA, the omega-3, which we use to make the myelin sheathing around our nerves, which allows them to conduct electrical impulses efficiently, which allowed for the massive expansion of the human brain. The other animal with the biggest brain people always love to drool over are dolphins. And what do dolphins eat all day? Rhetorical question, right? People can think about that for themselves. But anyhow, so humans are designed with a big brain. We're designed to eat seafood, and particularly shellfish and like oysters, mussels, and clams. They're basically made of rocks. If you've ever felt one of them, they build their own rock, and they're super high in minerals, which is awesome and great for the human brain, zinc and so on and so on. So eating shellfish, seafood is critical. As far as other dietary recommendations, because even though this isn't about a food diet, of course, it does play a role. But again, the more light that one gets, the less relevant the diet becomes. And again, I would be completely honest and say if someone's in the sun all the time, you could essentially drink Coca-Cola and you'll still be healthier than someone who eats salads all day long. And even, this is awesome that even Sachin Panda, this circadian rhythm researcher in San Diego, has shown that in animals that eat when they eat healthy food when they're not supposed to be eating, in other words, when their engines are designed to be turning off, like for us, that's nighttime. For mice, it's the opposite time of the day. But when we eat healthy food, when our engine is designed to be off versus eating unhealthy food when our engine is actually on and functioning, the animals that are eating the healthy food do worse off than the animals eating the unhealthy food. So just to be very clear on that, people think that the type of food you're eating is the thing that matters the most, but actually the evidence indicates that it's not the case at all. Think about it. If you try to put gas into an engine that's not running, like if you just started leaking gas into an engine that's not running, it's not going to do anything with the gas. It's just going to sit there and basically rot or whatever. I mean, the car analogy doesn't work quite as well. It's not as complex, but in this case, but if you put in gas when the engine is running, it's going to burn through it. So at least in our bodies, people can try to visualize. You have an engine that's designed to be turning off and you're pumping in a bunch of food, healthy or not. It doesn't matter. The physiologic effect is no bueno. It doesn't matter whether the food's healthy or not. And that's why the discussion about food lacking context of the engine that burns the food is nothing short of insanity. So that is some of the considerations. There's eating seafood. So yeah, I guess the point regarding diet is just pretty much focus on tuning the engines and be in the sun and eat local healthy food. Again, it's just amazing because there's people who, like an Ayurvedic doctor who I mentioned, he eats raw vegan and he's the healthiest, most clear mentally guy. And he's been doing this for years, like a decade, and he's not falling apart. He doesn't look bad. He looks amazing. He looks better than anyone else I've ever seen, mentally, physically, everything. And he's been doing it for a long time. I don't think he's going anywhere downhill, just based on my judgments again. But then you have people who are carnivores doing carnivore diets, and they are also oftentimes doing well, or at least mitigating. I mean, actually, oftentimes they're not doing well, I would say, because usually people who are carnivores are so sick that they eat anything besides meat, they feel like crap. So I would say carnivores, although they think they're doing very well, they're actually not doing very well at all. Like Michaela Peterson, very popular carnivore diet person. She's like, oh, I'm doing great, symptom-free. But if she eats anything besides beef, her body goes crazy and her joints start degrading themselves. So she's really not doing that well, if you really think about it. So, if she was stuck in the wild and had to survive on something besides beef, she would not survive. So, or at least she would struggle a lot. So, circadian rhythm reset and all that of being in nature, maybe it would help a lot, because she's not focused on the light right now. Anyway, the point is clear. I hope the engine focus is much more important than the fuel focus when discussing an organism that's run by engines, not by the fuel. So yeah, for example, in my case, I'm not by any means perfect. I'm still applying these things, working through the different things, looking to improve my health. Been traveling for 2 years, which has been tremendously detrimental on my circadian rhythm and whatnot, because I haven't been as acute about actually, I was kind of feeling like the typical young person, like I'm invincible, I can do whatever. I'm not going out and partying and drinking a ton. That definitely I feel very not well from. So I don't do that almost ever. But, and I prefer to get up at sunrise and surf or swim in the ocean. That for me is the best, to be honest, much more interesting anyhow. But, so what I've been sort of dealing with in my experimentations personally is there are days when, for example, because I've been creating circadian disruption, stressing myself out a lot, and so on, I haven't fully taken the time since I learned about this stuff to, let's say, apply it fully, which is sort of the classic, how could you say, the classic issue that health gurus often maybe fall prey to. They don't necessarily follow their own advice. Now, I follow my own advice, but I haven't 100% applied it to its maximum extent by going to a tropical place with chronic strong sunlight and staying there for a really significant period of time and getting in the sun a lot, particularly in the mornings. I was in Bali for 3 months, but I was so focused on my business. I was getting up every morning and just working throughout the morning hours when those are the key hours I should have been in the sun. So I learned a good lesson. But anyway, as a result of that, there have been points where I'll eat certain foods that, whether it's meat or some fruits or something else. Again, meat, fruits, you name it, certain foods. And I won't feel I'll feel a little sluggish or something, right? At certain portions of my journey, whether it's after I've taken a flight or whatever. And then I'll start going in my mind, I'll be blaming the food and I'll be like, oh, I was a meat heavy food. I can't really, something's off. I'm not fully burning through it. Or, I'll have some fruits and, oh, it's higher in deuterium, higher in sugar. I should avoid that too. And then I'll get in this headspace all about food. And the thing that I'm forgetting my own advice in those moments is that it doesn't really matter about the food. And the reason I'll say that is because what I'll do is I'll do a couple of days of getting back, resetting my circadian rhythm and getting everything humming again. And then I'll eat whatever, and it won't even strike me. Like I'll forget that I was even considering this just a few days ago. So it really just shows that it's easy to get caught up in debates about the fuel, but it's only possible when lacking the context of the engine. So that's sort of the dietary recommendation. I mean, generally at this point, I advise people to consume like what Dr. Cruz, who's a mentor of mine who taught me a lot of this stuff, is like a epi-paleolithic diet, meaning focused on epigenetics and primarily focused on seafood. So a seasonal seafood-based Paleolithic diet. So again, focus on seafood, maybe some meats, fruits, vegetables as they're seasonally available, and then you're good. But again, really the best diet is aquatarian, pescatarian, solartarian. That's like what I've got right now, solartarian diet. So can't live fully on sun. That's not the point. The point is that we get a lot of nutrition. It makes a lot of things run really smoothly in the body. And then, the remaining steps of the light diet, of course, avoiding non-native electromagnetic field technology. So you have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, AirPod headphones, forget it. For people who are curious about the science behind that, there's a book written called Going Somewhere, Truth About a Life in Science by a biophysicist and lawyer named Andrew Marino, who basically was working for a pioneer in the field of bioelectromagnetism, which means basically electricity in our body and how it works. And what Marino found, he was studying high voltage transmission power lines and basically found clearly that these had detrimental effects on the cell cycles, on the function of cells, and caused all kinds of abnormalities in blood chemistry and whatnot. It was a stressor to the body essentially, in ways that they didn't even fully understand, but they knew it was having a stressful effect and therefore increasing risk of disease. And that's what they found in their experiments. So he began to testify against high voltage transmission lines as an expert when people were suing them for building these lines over their houses. And then later on in engagements with the United States Navy and the radar they were using during the Cold War and so on. And essentially the lab that he was working with was their funding was revoked by the Veterans Administration because of the controversy they were engaging in that threatened the military and the Navy during the Cold War. And from there on, the evidence of the health effects of non-ionizing radiation, meaning radio and microwave frequencies used to communicate, has essentially been completely buried and ignored. There's a committee called the International Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, ICNIRP for short, as an abbreviation. And basically their standard is that if the non-ionizing radiation, again, meaning visible light or radio waves or microwaves, they don't ionize our molecule or atoms in our cells like X-rays and gamma rays do. So they're non-ionizing. Therefore, people might think they're not that harmful, or they couldn't be harmful. But it turns out, at least in the radio and microwave range, and even in the low-level static electric and magnetic fields emitted by power lines, low level in their frequencies, but it can still be very strong. ICNIRP basically says if it's not actually cooking tissue, like a microwave, for example, if it's not actually cooking your tissue like a microwave does to your food, then it can't affect the body biologically. And the research, though, from non-industry funded publications has shown consistently time and time again that that's not the case. It can cause things like cancer, infertility, DNA damage, and so on and so on. So, and this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed published studies. So the thing is, again, the telecommunications lobby in the United States is up there with the oil and pharmaceutical lobby. So basically, there's very little change occurring at this moment, because it's not going to come from like the higher up government bodies and telecommunications companies. It's going to come from people spreading this information and then demanding change. At least that's my current perception. So just for people who think, oh, that's just conspiracy theory, it's really not. You just don't know what you're talking about. So, anyway, that's that. And then that's a blue light at night, artificial light at night. So screen devices and so on and so on. It's problematic. That's sort of the run through of the light diet. So step one, go to sleep really early and watch the sunrise in the morning, be up for first light essentially, or for sunrise at least. 2, live outdoors during the day in the sun. Step 3, consume ample amounts of seafood, shellfish in particular. 4, consume unfluoridated water. 5, avoid man-made, non-native electromagnetic radiation. 6, use cold thermogenesis. So the ice baths, that's just another hack we could get into if you want later, but basically it kickstarts our metabolism, gets us burning fat, and basically turns our body on supercharged mode. And we can actually become fat adapted, or I should say cold adapted mammals. We already have the capacity, especially people of European descent, but all mammals today have this because we all descend from an ancestor that survived the dinosaur extinction, which was a period of cold after the asteroid, which in this case, we were using this fat burning to stay warm in cold climates adaptation to survive. So all mammals have this, and we can activate it when we're in cold water or just even cold air, although cold water gets the effects really quick. Best way to burn off weight. That's how, again, this mentor of mine who laid out a lot of these pieces from these different researchers I may mention, he burned off it. He lost 160 pounds using ice baths. It was an experiment that he thought wasn't going to work, but it actually did. So there's that. And then, of course, in the evening, block artificial light at night and repeat. Basically go to sleep early and repeat. And then I guess there's another step I didn't even mention, which is cultivate your inner light. This is very important because if you don't meditate or practice Qigong or something like this, read good books, have good friends, spend time with good people rather than energy vampires and so on, you're going to have issues. And the light diet won't be able to save you from, even optimal health won't save you from toxic friends, I think. It'll just maybe empower you to make better choices about who your friends are. So that's the light diet.
Yeah, that's a really great blueprint. So going back to that technology really quickly. So what are some of the practical things that people can start doing immediately? So what pops into my mind is turn off Bluetooth whenever you can, whenever you don't use it, or ideally
don't use it.
Don't use it. Then also
Get
airplane.
an aux cord for your car and use a cable for your phone hotspot. And then what else do you need Bluetooth for?
Yeah.
Don't wear an Apple Watch. If you don't ever wear an Apple Watch, for example, that kind of thing. Don't wear a Fitbit. Not that you shouldn't. Do whatever you want, of course, listener. But I mean, I'm just based on the research and prudence.
Yeah. I actually stopped wearing the.
I should say if you don't want to be at an increased risk for cancer, a significantly increased risk for cancer, then people can make up their own mind from there.
Yeah. I actually stopped using my Aura ring because that one also is using Bluetooth. It's on my finger, and it's you wear it while you sleep. Sorry,
Apparently you can turn that on airplane mode. I heard. Is that not accurate?
Yes, but then it stops measuring it, and I think it takes a long time to turn it back on again. I think I'd have to look it up again. But it's not a practical thing that you can just turn off. I think it needs to be on in order to actually track. And I'm not wearing it to look good. So I actually wanted to track my sleep. So that's also a thing. Avoiding these technologies. And then when it comes to laptops, I mean, at some point you have to get to work, right? So are there any things that you also do to mitigate that?
Yeah, the best hack for when you're on the road in particular, if you have a Wi-Fi router, you can look up how to basically, I have a YouTube video, how to turn off Wi-Fi while still using your router. Basically, you go into your browser, Google Chrome, Safari, Firefox, you go into your router settings and your network settings, whether you're on a Mac or a PC, and you type the router number into your browser, and that will actually bring up your router settings. So that's how you can change the password, the name of the router, all the other stuff that people usually don't know how to change, judging by, the long codes that most people never change after years of having the router in their house. But basically, then you can go in and just turn off the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz and the guest channels so that you don't have any Wi-Fi, so it won't show up if you search for Wi-Fi. But that turns off the radiation, but then you can plug in via Ethernet and do this. Again, the only way you'll be able to use that router after you've disabled these channels is by plugging in via an Ethernet cable, which you can get on Amazon. And so that's really handy. Or even if you still leave it on, but you just connect via Ethernet cable, because let's say there's other people in your house, you're still reducing your exposure tremendously, because even though the router is still radiating, your computer's no longer radiating because you've hardwired in. So it's exponentially lower exposure. Also, for example, like I'm not going to touch my phone right now just because I don't want to disrupt our connection, but I have my phone with a USB connection. And so my phone is the hotspot. So I don't have a long enough USB cable to make a really substantial impact. But basically, right now, my phone is the receiver and transmitter, which is a little bit further from me than my computer, like about 1 meter. But still, because of this inverse square law of electromagnetic radiation, what basically that means is that the further you go away from electromagnetic emitting point source, the strength of the field is reduced at a more exponential rate. So that's really good. Means you get distance away from these things and it reduces the strength substantially. So just, like I have a meter, I measure my phone. If I'm just a foot away or a meter away, the difference is huge over being just a few centimeters away. So it's not linear, basically. These are good hacks, turn your phone on airplane mode pretty much all the time. There's a great YouTube video actually about why, or in some article about how someone stopped being available all the time and just kept their phone on airplane mode, and how great and freeing it is to not just be available for people to ring you all the time. That's sort of how I've set things up. And if you do have to keep it on all the time, keep it off your body in a backpack, or in a purse, and so on. There's radiation blocking cases and shields that I don't think are very effective. Although I do have one that does work for a computer. It's like a case called Defender Pad, and it's like a laptop sleeve. But then when I work on my laptop on my lap, it at least blocks the electric and the magnetic fields from going down onto my lap. But then they are kind of going up onto my face more. So it's really just not really optimal. But there's things like this that you can wires to Ethernet to your phone hotspot. If you can get a long cable, the phone hotspot's the best because you can put your phone 10 feet or 2-3 meters away from you, and then you're really pretty much golden and still connected to the internet anywhere in the world.
Yeah, nice. So what's your take on the upcoming 5G changes, or what's coming there in terms of technology?
So I'm more an expert in light and not necessarily in electromagnetic fields, although I still know a lot more about this than 99% of people. But basically, 5G radiation is going to be 5G radiation is going to be a very big problem for health. It's basically 4G and 3G have already been proven to cause issues. There was a study that was done over many years that was funded by the US government, the National Toxicology Program. People can look this up. And even though they constantly were going back and forth about releasing the results, because there was always some pushback from the telecommunications industry and whatnot, they finally did. And even with just 2G frequencies, so from the oldest cell phones and regular cell phone networks, there was cancer in these animals. So imagine 3G, then 4G, and that's already bad enough. Now 5G is going to involve the creation of hundreds and hundreds of times more emitters, like antennas, little small cells distributed every few hundred meters all around cities and office buildings on every floor, everywhere, with frequencies that are significantly higher and stronger than before. So basically, I think it's kind of like, even though, again, because of the story I mentioned or I told you about with non-ionizing radiation and the standards that are grossly inadequate at the moment, they're basically maxing out exposure just to the point where we're not quite there, but getting much closer to the level of actually being cooked, but still low enough that it's not heating our tissue. But it's going to just make all the biological effects that have been researched probably a lot worse. I think we're already seeing the effects in cities where they're upping the strength of 4G and pretty much everywhere. I mean, chronic diseases, cancer, like I hear it all the time, like this person got cancer, that person got cancer. It's totally normal now, So like people have already accepted this as normal. So the more we accept it as normal, the more likely that it'll be our own fate. And basically, so yeah, I think 5G will be kind of like, you could almost argue like Armageddon, but not really like Armageddon, just lots of people getting really sick, the sickness becoming more and more normalized, healthcare costs continuing to skyrocket and literally threatening the stability of nations as far as healthcare costs go, because it's already such a massive expenditure of the US government. We have so much debt, for example, the country at least. So I think it's going to be really messy, but I do have confidence that with my own work, I'll be able to, because I've made, just because pursuing this, this is the top level stuff out there. Like I've gotten connected to a lot of like you could say really influential celebrities who, like, for example, who are interested in this stuff, like the founder of Twitter buys our glasses, so like there's people high up who know about this stuff. So I think it's not going to be too big of an issue when the effects become exceptionally clear to make changes on these things. But it's not going to happen, I think, until it's really, really bad. But the fact, I think, is it'll get really, really bad, and then maybe we'll be able to make things really good, because I kind of feel like we have a generation, like yourself, myself, two guys I did podcasts with yesterday, someone I'm doing one with this evening, like really awake generation, I would say. People who are really not accepting that we're just have to be basically, destroyed by our environment and a product of that. So I have, to be honest, good faith.
Yeah, for people like us, definitely, because I think there's going to be communities that are going to be built, especially for people like us who are like, who know about this stuff, who take their health really seriously, and then build little communities. I mean, you already see that with I don't know if you heard about Powder Mountain, from the founders of Summit Series. They've actually bought a mountain, and they're selling real estate there for different entrepreneurs and people who really want to change something in the world. And I think there would be one of these communities that would get out of the city and actually optimize around health and those sort of issues. One more thing that I wanted to touch on really quickly is that obviously you talk a lot about sun, but I think for the cells, the other ingredient would also be oxygen, to really make them function optimally. So what are some of the things that that could be done there to actually further power your machine or make your machine work better?
Could you actually repeat the question? Sorry, I was so tempted. I just looked up Powder Mountain.
Nice. Yeah, definitely look it up. Everyone that's listening to it, you're already like looking for real estate on there. Like, yes.
Like, I'm buying. I'm in. No, but anyway, please. They're high elevation. They're getting strong sunlight. It's actually not a bad idea. I think it's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Let me know if you find any real estate on there, because maybe we can share a bit if we can't afford it ourselves. I was asking about the oxygen and also sun part. So these are the two things that I've heard is the most important things for the cells. Obviously, you talk a lot about sun, but then also oxygen. I heard that one of the best health indicators is VO2 max, or components. So is there anything that you know about that? I know
I don't know much about VO2 max, and that's more in like the training and fitness world, something I'll definitely learn more about down the road. However, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me, so let's think about it this way. VO2 max, I know it means it's consumption of oxygen. It's the ability of the body to consume oxygen. So I would presume that it has a lot to do with the functioning of your red blood cells, which their function is driven by the light energy that they absorb from the sun. So, like, for example, I can say that after I sleep, when my body is least damaged and most charged up, and then I get in the morning sun for a while, I can lay in the ocean, and I like to go under and breath hold and just sit in the quiet water for minutes. It's really nice for me. And I know that in the morning, again, when my body's the least damaged, fresh after a night of sleep, and I've got in the morning sun, I can sit down in the water and hold my breath for several minutes with very little issue and just feeling like no stress, really relaxed. Later in the day, the effect is very different. So just that finding experience of my own, I would say, would indicate to me that if someone's doing, let's say the light diet and improving their mitochondrial and function of their red blood cells, their VO2 max will increase without really doing any tremendous amount of training. Although, of course, you're going to need to do training to improve these systems that are based on a lot of exertion and whatnot. And, fitness experts are going to know a lot more about this than I would. But of course, to me, it's just, we have to improve our engines in our body so that if we want to work optimally, that's basically it to me.
How do you distinguish between people who are experts who you take seriously and people who sound like experts but actually aren't? Because that's something I'm actually struggling with, because I'm not someone that is really passionate about looking up studies and then deciphering them and then making them, like helping them make sense for me. What do you look for?
Well, I just read different things and talk to different people, and I find what makes the most sense to me. And at one point, it was Rob Wolf and Chris Kresser and the Paleo guys. Then when I learned about Dr. Jack Kruse and his much deeper, explanations, then he made more sense. And as I've learned more, I've learned about Ayurveda and Eastern not wisdom, which is very much, Dr. Kruse's piecing together of the work of various scientists who I'm also, learning from. It implies that, again, like I said earlier, Ayurveda and these Eastern traditions actually have quite a lot more to them than has been traditionally, I thought. And so that's sort of what I'm looking into now, these ancient schools of thought that have thousands of years of testing. So I would say that I just mostly go off of what makes sense to me and my intuition and what actually works when I apply it. And then there's lots of people who, profess certain theories like that are something that don't necessarily make sense to me, but it works for other people. The way that I think about it is like, I have a very, I'd say, more conservative or libertarian philosophy, not necessarily politically, but that, people can do what they want with their life. And it's not, my life is my life and I do what I want. And as long as people's ways of operating on the world aren't based on infringing on my rights and my life and whatnot, then I don't mind. So yeah, I mean, I think of it like I can follow who I want and I'm satisfied with that. And then other people can follow who they want and they can be satisfied with that. And it doesn't bother me. Do I care if someone is following a false expert who's professing bad information? Like, I don't, because it would kill me if I did, for all the people who are prone to bad thinking, all the people who don't care about themselves enough to make like an impact. It would just be way too much of an energy drain. I find that the best is just to focus on optimizing myself and then spread and I reject any theory that people, where people believe that like we should be sacrificial animals, where like our whole purpose should be to exist for others. Like, I reject that. I believe I should live for myself and betterment of my own life. And that, and only in that case anyway, will I'll be able to have the maximum beneficial impact for those around me. Because, for example, I think of it like, if I haven't figured out the best thing that works for me, which again, at this point, it's the light diet plus what I'm learning from Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine and Qigong and this kind of stuff, then I'm not going to, if I had basically taken the stance when I had first learned about the paleo diet that, oh, this is the right answer, let me profess this to everyone, which I was trying to do, it barely worked for me. I was a mess, so no one was listening to me anyway. But as I've learned more, people have been more interested in the light diets working effectively enough that people are just emailing me to do podcasts and stuff. So it's coming together, but there's going to be further and further evolution. So I hope that kind of answers your question. It makes me uncomfortable because, like, again, let's say I'm almost calling myself an expert in regards to the health effects of lighting and electromagnetic fields and this stuff, but I'm not a scientific, peer-reviewed, published person, but I know a lot about it. And so I share it. And if someone wants to criticize that, like, oh, he's not an expert, he's just a bro scientist, like, great. You can think what you want. That's fine.
Yeah. I have great respect for anyone that, puts themselves out there like that and actually does the experience and lives them like you do. And, I definitely have a lot of respect for those people who are then actually willing to say, hey, I've tried this and I've talked a lot about this, but I feel like I was actually wrong about this and I'm trying more things around here. So actually being that experiment yourself. So I think that's great. I think you'd also, I don't know, you might also already be an Ayn Rand fan. You know the author, Ayn Rand, the fountainhead? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I thought of immediately when you said that. You look after yourself.
Yeah. No, I'm quoting her.
Nice. Yeah. Big book recommendation for anyone out there who's just following other people.
Atlas Shrugged is for me the best.
Yeah. I'll be reading it soon as well. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Should help me.
I would add that, for example, like I have barely begun, on what I'm working on, I'd say for the next decade, at least the work of my 20s, because I just turned 20 a few weeks ago. So, just getting started, I would say. in regards to all this stuff. And like, because I'm young, I think, and, you know, people like me, I don't get a lot of criticism at this point. I mean, maybe here and there people will say things that I don't see or hear, but I imagine, you know, as this goes further, I'll just like any person who puts themselves out there, I'll get tons of criticism, nasty remarks from low dopamine people. And, you know, maybe they have good intentions, maybe they don't, but it doesn't matter. Like, I'm just going to do my thing and do my thing.
Yeah, I like that. So where can people find out more about you if they want to learn more
Yeah.
about these topics?
I would say that I have an Instagram page at The Light Diet. So people can just follow me there. I don't post a ton now, but I'll be posting more as things develop, you know, courses, blogs, different products, different companies, and so on and so on. So that'll be really interesting. And then Raw Optics is my blue light blocking glasses company. Very, very great. It's just awesome, I would say. We have a page, an Instagram page, raw_optics, and that's RA, like Ra, the Egyptian sun god, not raw, like raw milk. So RA_optics, Raw Optics. And then rawoptics.com is the website for blue blockers. And we can, if you'd like, we can get you hooked up with a discount code for your followers, and they can, if they're interested in, you know, investing in themselves, then they can do so.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. I'll link them in the show notes as well. And yeah, thank you very much for being on here.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you got something valuable out of it. Also, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you like this and you want to see more, then make sure you subscribe and also hit that bell notification to be notified when a new video comes out. And we're looking for more high-performing, established business owners in our group. So that's why you should check out the description as well and apply to join our group. It's 100% for free. We look for self-aware, self-developed, established business owners that are high performers and that are interesting and would add value to our group. We have weekly calls where we help each other out and just chat and have a bunch of fun. So if that sounds interesting to you, then just check out the link in the description below, and I'll see you on there.